Thanks again for joining us today. We're excited to have the Hill Prizes information session. My name is Terrence Henry. I serve as the Executive Director of TAMIS, the Texas Academy of Medicine, Engineering, Science, and Technology. We really appreciate the time and the effort that goes into submitting a proposal for the Hill Prizes. So we hope this session will provide you some helpful information that can guide you in the process. We're excited to share some additional details about the process and timeline today, and we'll also have some time at the end to answer your questions. Briefly, we'll go over the agenda and then we'll get started. So first we'll go over the purpose and objectives of the prizes, then the timeline and process. We'll tell you a little bit about the prize committee. Then the probably most relevant portion of the session is the selection criteria, scoring, eligibility criteria and categories, and the required application guidelines and materials, as well as the funding guidelines and requirements if you're awarded the prize. Then again, at the end, we'll have time for a Q&A, and you'll have an opportunity to ask written and verbal questions during the Q&A. Before we jump in, we'll tell you just a little bit about our organization. TAMIS is a statewide society with a mission to foster collaboration, nurture the next generation of scientists, and advance the research enterprise in Texas. We were founded over 20 years ago in 2004 by our honorary chair, Senator Kay Bailey Hutchison, and Nobel laureates Michael Brown and Richard Smalley. We have more than 365 Texas-based members of the three national academies that make up our organization. Those are the National Academies of Medicine, Engineering, and Sciences, as well as other honorary societies and the state's 8 Nobel laureates. We'd also like to take a moment today to thank our TAMIS 2025 annual conference presenting sponsors, Briar Capital and Lyda Hill Philanthropies. And with that, I'm now pleased to introduce our chair of the Hill Prizes Committee, Dr. David Daniel. Dr. Daniel is the past board president of TAMIS and president emeritus of the University of Texas at Dallas. He's also a member of the National Academy of Engineering. Dr. Daniel, over to you.
Thanks so much, Terrence, and welcome everyone. Good morning or good evening, depending on where in the world you are. The Hill Prizes are named in honor and recognition of Lyda Hill and Lyda Hill Philanthropies. We thank them for creating the prize and partnering with us. In essence, they provide the money and we provide the expertise to select the winners. It's just a terrific partnership. I've had the privilege of working with a lot of organizations over a lot of years. And I can just tell you, Lyda Hill Philanthropies is just a phenomenal organization, highly professional, just incredibly visionary people. And it's a real pleasure for TAMIS to be working with them. Next one, please. A fair amount of the information we'll be presenting, in fact, maybe essentially all of it is in the application guide on the website. So we'll kind of blast through these and try to just hit the high points. The two most important words here are could and impact. The successful prize-winning proposal could have a very significant impact on science and society if successful. That doesn't mean that this is sort of late-stage commercialized immediate work, but I'd say basic research that's very fuzzy on how or even if it would have an impact is not necessarily what this program is all about. So that word impact is probably the single most important word. And as you write your applications for the Hill Prize, I'd ask myself over and over, if this really works, what would the impact be? And of course, the greater the potential impact, I think the more highly ranked the proposal is going to be. Next one, please. The objectives are to propel high risk, high reward work. I won't read all this, but I will say a word about risk. So how risk averse are we in the selection committee? We're willing to tolerate a lot of risk. I would say it would go too far if you've got an idea and you don't really know whether it's going to work or not at all. And if it doesn't work, it's just a complete washout and a complete failure. I think we expect some work would have been done to add some validity to the idea, but certainly we're not looking just to make sure bets here. We're willing to take some risk, but we want to see some novel idea and some scientific basis for the great review team to believe that this is reasonable, that this could really work out for real world impact. And I would just add, in terms of real world impact, what do we mean by that? We mean that it gets used by people. For some ideas, it'll only get used if it gets commercialized. There are other big ideas that maybe involve some policy implication in order to make it work, or global acceptance or government acceptance. So we don't have a one-dimensional view of how you make a real world impact. In fact, we have a very broad view and don't wish to constrain you in thinking about that. Next slide, please. There are 6 categories listed there. Each of the 6 prizes has a $500,000 award associated with it. The money goes to the recipient's institution or organization. I would add a couple of notes. In addition to the prize money, Lyda Hill Philanthropies has committed at least $1 million, and I suspect they're going to spend a lot more than that, in discretionary funding for highly competitive proposals that did not win. So there's even if you don't win the prize, particularly if your work aligns with Lyda Hill Philanthropies' sort of core mission, there's a good chance you may receive some additional funding. TAMIS, though, will be identifying which are the highly competitive proposals and sharing that information with Lyda Hill Philanthropies. Lyda Hill Philanthropies takes it from there and decides which, if any, of the projects they want to fund, but they have committed at least $1 million to the discretionary funding. They also this year ran full-page ads in Nature and Science congratulating the Hill Prize winners. And they did this in large part because one of their key objectives is to advance science in Texas and to help the great scientists, engineers, and health professionals in Texas achieve success. Sometimes on the committee, we wonder whether the recognition is more valuable than the 500,000, or the 500,000 is more valuable. I think the key takeaway is we hope both are very valuable to the winners in both the recognition and the monetary support that the prize provides. Next one, please. This is the timeline. Again, all this information is available. The key is the May 31st deadline at 6 p.m. The other one is the February 2, 2026, and I would encourage each applicant, strongly encourage each applicant to pencil in that afternoon and evening on your calendar, because that's the opening reception for our annual meeting where we will publicly recognize the recipients. Each one has always been there in the past 2 years, and we hope if any of you on this call are a winner, we expect that you would be there too. The Lyda Hill Philanthropies folks are always there as well, and it's a great chance to have your name recognized and mingle with some people who could be very helpful to you. Not everyone on the team needs to attend, just the lead or the PI we expect to attend. Next one, please. The committee selection process, the committee will review and rank the applications after that we sort through them in June. They will pick 3 finalists, if you will, to move forward with external review. We will select National Academies members outside of the state of Texas for external review. We want to get independent of our Texas viewpoint, highly skilled people to review these. And then you can see the rest of the process. The proposed winners go to the Nobel and Breakthrough Prize Committee, and ultimately to the TAMIS Board of Directors, which meets in early December. The winners then would be notified in early December after the board has made its final determination. Next one, please. This is the prize selection committee and subcommittees. There are 6 subcommittees, 1 for each of the 6 Hill Prizes. It's really these subcommittees that will be making the selections. You can see it here for medicine, public health, and engineering. All are National Academies members. Some have more than one academy. In selecting these, we tried to get a pretty eclectic mix of backgrounds and also companies or institutions. Next slide, please. Here you see the biological sciences, physical sciences, and technology subcommittees, and I'll say more about that in just a minute. I just want to offer my sincere thanks to these folks. They're all volunteers. They donate their time, which is a fair amount of time for them to go through the applications and to select the winners. Thanks to each of them. I would note that it's possible that there may be some a change or two in the subcommittee composition. It's possible someone may develop a hopeless conflict or get sick or something like that. But I think this will pretty much be it. Next one. After the subcommittees make their recommendation, the recommendations go to the Nobel and Breakthrough Prize Laureates Committee to review the applications. The winners can note that their prize was selected in part based on Nobel and Breakthrough Prize Committee recommendations. Next one, please. Probably the topic of most interest to those on this webinar are how applications are evaluated and scored. So the applications first will look at any applications that might be perhaps in the wrong category. You, the applicant, decide which of the 6 categories you would propose, but we'll look for any obvious problems with that before these go to the 6 subcommittees. These are the questions that the subcommittees will be looking at. What is the uniqueness of the idea? We're not interested in funding that somebody has pretty much already done. Is the idea unique? I wouldn't say it has to be so unique that nobody's ever worked on it before, but it is a novel and unique pathway forward. Potential for commercial application or real-world impact. I again emphasize what we're looking for is some pathway, not necessarily a firm fixed pathway, but some reasonable expectation that if the idea works out and the research validates it, this can get out to the real world through a commercial entity or a viable commercial pathway. Again, not necessarily a company name, but just conceptually, how would this go forward? A bit of a roadmap almost, if you will, or if not through a commercial entity, what would be the other pathway to impact? We're going to look at the strengths of the research group leader and or team. We want to make sure the applicant is well qualified to actually do the work. I should note that occasionally we'll get a great proposal from somebody who's worked mostly in their career in Area B, and they've been motivated to branch out into Area B. That's okay. The person is obviously highly skilled, and it's not a crazy stretch in a whole different direction for which they have no experience. But we're not necessarily looking for tunnel vision here in the nature of the work. And the ability and availability of key personnel and infrastructure. So the subcommittees will receive their proposals, and it could be anywhere from 10 to 50 proposals in each of the category. And they will down select to a group of 3 finalists. The way they do this is they rank the proposals in groups, and then they come back and discuss. Let's say they're looking for 3 finalists. They may discuss 7 or 8 of the most highly ranked proposals together as a group. I should caution you or encourage you to take special attention to the 50-word statement that Stephanie will tell you about later on the title page, and the 250-word summary. You can imagine that if you're on a committee with 50 proposals, the first thing you're going to look at are those 50-word statements and 250-page abstracts as you're looking at a 50 for maybe your 7 or 8 favorite ones that you like the best. So I'd encourage you to share those draft statements with a trusted colleague and just say, how does this look to you? Have I adequately expressed uniqueness, a pathway to have a real-world impact that's of great significance? I would just encourage you to get past the first review stage by having very, very strong statements. Next one, please. The concern has sometimes been expressed about people on the subcommittees who are in your institution or in your company. I would just tell you, don't worry about conflicts of interest. That's our challenge and our problem, if you will, to deal with conflicts of interest. So pay no attention to that and give it no worry. We do have a robust conflict of interest policy that's very consistent with the policies at National Academies level in DC. Committee members can't apply, they can't be on teams, they must disclose any potential conflict, and that could result in something as simple as disclosure or something more complex such as recusal. Again, don't worry about that. Trust me, we'll worry about that and give considerable attention to make sure that conflicts do not enter into the decision process. Next one. So who may apply? It's open to all Texas-based applicants, TAMIS members and non-TAMIS members. And in fact, if you look at the past winners, some have been TAMIS members and many have not been TAMIS members. You have to be at least 15 years into your career, if you will, your first time appointment. And I'll explain why on the next slide, but that's a requirement. You have to, the PI at least, you see the third bullet, the team leader PI must meet all eligibility requirements, and those are the two key bullets above those. The PI must be in Texas for at least 2 years at the time of application. You need not have been at the same institution in Texas. You could have moved from one place to another, but you must have been in business. Why? Because Lyda Hill wants to help Texas. She wants to highlight Texas science and the great scientists, health professionals, and engineers and technologists in Texas. You must have approval from your organization to submit the proposal. It's a $500 prize that is a lot more like a gift than it is a research contract with a federal agency. You self-report that. We don't need a letter. You just need to assure us that it has institutional approval. And often that's the vice president of research or someone at that level who has approved it. We encourage institutions to screen the applicants and not submit a bunch, but we don't require it. This is really up to the investigators, not the administrators, to decide who applies. The only reason we put that last bullet in is it's not in the best interest of an institution to, let's say, send in a dozen different proposals in one area, say medicine, where 8 of those dozen proposals really aren't even competitive. You know, it's just wide open. That does not reflect very well on the institution. That doesn't happen very often, but we have seen a bit of that in some cases. So that's our only reason for doing it. We want to motivate you, the investigators, to bring forward your best ideas. Next one, please. The 15-year requirement, why do we have that? It's because we also have a major award that's been around almost since the beginning of TAMIS. It's the Edith and Peter O'Donnell Awards. And it's meant for really mid-career people who are no more than 15 years into their career. We did not want to sort of conflict with the Edith and Peter O'Donnell Awards requiring less than 15 years in your career. So we require that you be at least, or at least the lead be, and only the lead or the PI or co-PIs are required to comply with that. The second bullet explains what's meant by calendar year. If you have any questions about that, contact Terrence Henry or Stephanie Shaw. They can tell you how to interpret that. This requirement only applies to the principal investigator or to the team lead. So if you're a relatively young person and you want to apply for the Hill Prize, you may do that provided that the lead meets the eligibility criteria. You could be one of the key people on the project, but not the lead on the project. I would just note that the lead must really be the lead. You can't just put someone in there in name only and have them not really lead the project. And this is actually a great opportunity for someone who doesn't meet the 15-year criteria to identify a great colleague and mentor who would be actively engaged and actually lead the project, and from whom you might learn and benefit, and for whom they would learn and benefit from your input. Next one. And you reapply? Yes, any applicant for a previous award may apply, even if you had received some discretionary funding from the Lyda Hill Philanthropies group. Perhaps you were a highly competitive one, you didn't win, received some funding, you're fully eligible to reapply. You just have to follow the guidelines, which change slightly from year to year, and meet all eligibility criteria. Next one, please. This is a challenge. Which category should I choose for some of the areas? An engineering area that could be perhaps in medicine, or another biological sciences that could also be in medicine. We leave it to you to decide. There are some limitations, however. The medicine, public health, engineering, biological sciences, and physical science categories are meant for universities, medical centers, health science centers, and nonprofit research institutes. In other words, not a company. One of the academic or health institutions is really what we're targeting. The technology one is just the opposite. Universities, health science centers may not apply for the technology category. It's meant for businesses, nonprofit research institutes, which can apply to either one. Any organization in the private sector, including a startup or spin-out company from a university. The public health category entered as a new category in the second year. We're about to start the third year. And one of the things that the Public Health Subcommittee has talked about is the definition of public health. And I'm going to share with you the definition that the Public Health Subcommittee developed. And I'll read it twice to you. The definition is protecting the health of the entire population through science, technology, and policy. Let me read that one more time. Protecting the health of entire populations through science, technology, or policy. So I hope that helps. Really, the entire population is what the public health is all about. Medicine is more directed, obviously, toward the individual. One subtlety here, we'll mention collaboration in a minute, but I specifically want to address spin-out or startup companies. Let's say you've got a startup company that is thinking about partnering with its host institution in putting forth a Hill Prize application, and I very much hope we'll see some of those applications. Should the lead be the startup company applying to the technology group, or should it be the university applying to one of the other 5 categories? My advice to you would be to ask yourself 2 questions. Who is the lead? Are they mostly spending their time in the startup company, or mostly spending their time in the university? Follow the lead. Another way to look at it is follow the money. Will most of the money be spent by the startup company, or will most of the money be spent by the university? The subcommittees will be looking at sort of the sensibility of that mix. And I would just say go with the one that makes the most sense in terms of where the leader is spending their time and where the money is being spent. If the lead is mostly in the startup company and the majority of the money is spent through the startup company, I'd advise applying through the technology category. If the reverse is true, I'd advise applying to one of the others. Next one, please. So I'm getting into this already. How do team submissions work? For example, a startup company and a university applying as a team would be one example. A university applying with a business would be another. 2 universities, or 1 university and 1 health science center. We've seen all of these sorts of team applications. We welcome these and encourage these. I would just say don't make up a team submission just for the purpose of saying, well, we have a team. That won't necessarily get you anywhere. It needs to be a meaningful collaboration. It needs to be one where the review committee is going to be, oh, that's great. So-and-so is working with so-and-so in a very rational way, and in a way that will help bring this idea to successful realization. I mentioned before the second bullet, whoever the lead is, they must be an active leader. They can't be a leader in name only. They can't be a figurehead leader. They must be a real leader. You may have multi-organizational and mixes, as I've shown before, but we'll only allow 1 lead organization. Lyda Hill Philanthropies does not want to sort of contract with 2 organizations. They want to contract with 1. So there will be only 1 lead organization. The money, by the way, can flow to multiple organizations, but it starts with the lead organization. Okay, next one, please. The team must be concentrated in Texas, and I would say the team lead absolutely must be in Texas. Question, can you partner with someone outside of the state of Texas or even outside the US? Answer is yes, they would not be the lead or the primary. But let's say you've got a key piece of your idea where the best in the world is outside Texas and you propose to make them one of the team members or a subcontractor. That's perfectly fine. Just make the case that we want to bring the best and brightest from the world together and put this team together to realization. But the team must be concentrated in Texas, but not necessarily entirely centered in Texas. You may submit an application with a PI and a co-PI. I would encourage you not to have more than two. I suppose Terrence would not, Stephanie would not light their hair on fire if it were three, but we're not looking for 6 co-PIs. That's of no advantage whatsoever. It's mostly, I would say, if the lead really feels like there's another collaborator who's almost an equal partner. They feel sometimes a little uncomfortable declaring themselves the lead without recognizing the really important collaborator. So we're happy to work with you on that and for you to have a co-PI. And if you identify a co-PI, we would recognize them, of course, in the prize award process. There's no maximum number of personnel. You can have as many as you want. But really, we only need bios for the PI or the team lead. You can just mention the other personnel. You could say, you know, one of our team members will be professor of blah, blah, an expert in such and such from the University of ABC, or a world-renowned expert in such and such from University ABC, who will help us with or take a key role in this part of the project. In other words, one sentence just explaining to the subcommittee why this person is there. And you want the subcommittee reviewers to go, oh yeah, that makes sense. That would be a real great addition to this team for the idea that they're proposing. Next one, please. And I think that's my last one, isn't it, Stephanie? I'm going to hand it off to you.
It is. Thank you so much, Dr. Daniel. I'll now talk a bit about the required materials for the Hill Prizes. So all the required materials are posted on the TAMIS website and in the application guide and the online submission form. We ask that you please pay close attention to the requirements because they're essential for an efficient review by the selection committee. So proposals will be submitted via an online submission form called Submittable. You do need to create an account for this submission, so please do so early on in case you run into any issues. You can contact TAMIS at any time for help, and you can contact the Submittable help if you run into any issues there. Submittable gives the applicants the ability to edit and upload new proposals after your submission. So if you've submitted and then you realize that you want to change something before the deadline, you do have the ability to do so. It'll also automatically notify you of the receipt of your application and the status of your application. So if you are not selected as a recipient, you will receive a notification through the Submittable portal. And just a reminder that the deadline is at 6:00 p.m. on May 31st. For required materials, each proposal will include the following items, and they're all to be combined and submitted as one PDF document. The first is a cover page, and that'll include applicant information specified in the application guide. The cover page must include a statement up to 50 words and an abstract summary up to 250 words. Next will be the proposal. This will be up to 5 pages in length. And then finally will be the biographical summary for the principal investigator. This is not to exceed 3 pages unless you would like to submit your NIH or NSF biosketch, and that would be in lieu of the biographical summary. And as Dr. Daniel said, only the bios for the PI are necessary, and then for other key personnel like co-PIs and team members, that'll be a 1-page max biography. Sorry, back one. Thank you. Like I just mentioned, they'll all need to be submitted as one PDF. So there'll only be one upload form for all of these materials. The format is Times New Roman 11-point font, margins of 1/2 inch. We do not require detailed budgets, and I will talk a little bit about what the budget entails in a moment. We also will not accept letters of recommendation or support. And then something that's a little new this year, if you have applied last year, we'll also ask for a separate standalone copy of your cover page. So you will be asked to include it in your one PDF and also submit it separately. This is just for the committee review. So now I'll talk about a bit about the applicant statement summary. So the first one will be 50 words or less, and this should include a statement on the research and why it should be chosen for the Hill Prizes and what the potential impact of the research is. So like David said earlier, this is something you want to spend a lot of time on and maybe share it around with a couple colleagues to make sure that it really is punchy and gets to what you're hoping that the committee sees when they first look at your cover page. And then next will be the abstract summary. This will be 250 words or less. And then it'll be an abstract of your proposal. Now the proposal. So this is the main portion. There's a max number of 5 pages for this, and it should include what the problem is that you're trying to solve and what the key gap that this work will fill. If there's any limitations of current approaches and how yours is novel and can fill those limitations. The potential impact, and if possible, supported by relevant metrics. If there's any potential commercial and translational applications of the work already, what that path to impact for your proposal is, and how you will use the Hill Prize funding to accelerate your work and make a significant impact on society. So this is your chance to really share with the committee what your proposal is and why they should select it. The budget is next. So like I mentioned, we do not require a detailed budget, but you will need to describe how you will use the funding within your 5-page statement for the proposal. So for example, if you're going to use the money to pay researchers, buy equipment, hire contractors, etc., that's what you would put in the proposal and then share approximate amounts for each category. And this should demonstrate to the reviewers that how you're planning to use the prize funding aligns with your goal of how you want to maximize the impact of your idea. For the biographical summary, we've talked about this already, but you can use, if you're the PI, you can use your NIH or NSF BioSketch or a 3-page max biographical summary. And all of this is included in the application guide. And then for the other team members, it would just be a 1-page max biographical summary. Next is citations. So for the biographical summary, you can submit up to 10 citations, and you can also have additional citations or key references as an additional element to the proposal. So these, if you would like to include them, they would be included last in your PDF. And submitted as part of that one PDF, and it does not count towards the 5-page limit. And just to note, the review committee is not evaluating proposals based on how many citations or extensive literature review, but a few key citations are welcome. Now, a bit about the funding requirements. So recipients' organizations will retain full intellectual property rights, and the expenditures must follow spending policies of the recipient's organization. Funds may not be used for overhead or indirect charges, but they may be used for salary support for team members. And that's something that you would just include in your detailed budget, or sorry, not your detailed, just your budget within the proposal. Like we mentioned earlier, the PI must be at a Texas organization and stay active there for at least 1 year. And they must be able to attend the prize ceremony at the TAMIS conference on February 2nd, 2026. Part of the conference, TAMIS will provide the PI's travel and lodging for the ceremony and registration for the conference. And if selected, the prize recipients will coordinate with Lyda Hill Philanthropies directly on the funding schedule. If they are selected, they must provide a statement on impact of the funding on their work annually until after 1 year of the prize funds have been expended, and they'll include a brief explanation on how the funding was used. So that's the overview of required materials. the application form will be linked on the TAMIS website, in our emails, and the application guide. And we also have an FAQ with answers that we're constantly updating. So if you would like, that's a really helpful resource. And we'll also be updating based on questions that we've received and will receive through this information session. So I will now turn it to Q&A.
Hey, Stephanie, may I interject for just a second?
Absolutely.
Will these slides be made available to folks?
Yes, the slides and the recording will be available and sent out as a follow-up to those who attended and were not able to attend.
That's great. I'd like to make a couple of comments as people are preparing their question. Is it possible to pull up slide 27? What should be in the proposal? Yeah. So this is really important. For those of you on a computer, you might even take a screenshot of this one. Those key things, it actually looks a little bit by intention like the DARPA Hellmeyer criteria. You know, what are you trying to solve? What's the limitation of the current approaches? I want to emphasize that this successful proposal will not look like most NSF and NIH proposals. I remember the first year, one of the proposals was obviously thrown together at the last minute and just cut and pasted from an NSF proposal. It was kind of a disaster, I would say. That's not what this is all about. It's a different kind of proposal. And it's kind of tough to write all this down in 5 pages and make it meaningful, but pay close attention to this would be my advice to make the strongest proposal. The last thing before we go to questions, Stephanie mentioned citations. Again, this is not an NSF type proposal where we're looking for 35, publications to show that you are well up to the literature. Instead, I would encourage you to make sure the most important publications are cited. I recall one proposal where somebody was kind of branching out into a new field, and the review committee noted that of the 7 or 8 references, they missed the 2 most important references in that field. And that did not reflect well, I would say, on the proposer, that they didn't catch the most important ones. So my advice to you is not look for length, but do make sure that there are seminal key publications relevant to your idea that you cite them. Okay, forgive me for jumping in, but again, thanks so much, Stephanie. Back to you.
Thank you. We actually have one of the chair of the Public Health Subcommittee, Ellen Gritz, with us here today. Ellen, would you like to talk a bit more about the public health category?
Yes, I'd be delighted to. Let's see. Can we turn on my face? Can you take away? Can you get rid of that picture? If not, I'll just talk with my.
Don't think so, unfortunately.
Okay, all right. So I'll talk with my fancy outfit. Okay, that was one of my retirement pictures for anyone who wants to know. So the public health category was a new category last year, and we received a group of excellent applications. The majority of the applications were what I would call very high tech. A lot of them involved basic biology as part of the approach. They involved a lot of IT. They involved broad genetic techniques. So there was a lot of what I would call public health technology. We did not get as many proposals in the behavioral science category. And one of the reasons that this new prize was created was to be able to embrace the broad span of research that falls under behavioral science and public health. So while we are interested and aiming to target an entire population, there are behaviors, human behaviors, that are involved in targeting and preventive health and public health. For example, any kind of substance use, or smoking cessation, or alcohol, or dietary, or physical activity, or cancer survivorship. So they would involve techniques, public health techniques, that are aimed at groups of individuals, and I would not suggest submitting those into the medicine category, because even though they involve individuals, they are part of the realm of public health. So we broadly and greatly encourage anyone in the behavioral science fields who feels they have appropriate proposals to submit. And I'd be happy to take any questions that reflect what I was just saying. Thank you.
Thank you, Ellen. Let's see, we do have some questions in the chat. David, I'll ask you some of them. Someone's asking if multi-investigator teams are preferable.
Yeah, thanks. I can see that in the chat, Stephanie. No, I would say they aren't preferable per se. And by multi-investigator, I'm thinking of two cases. One would be two different people in the same institution, and the other would be two different people in different institutions, let's say, or multiple people. We funded both. We funded Hill Prize winners that were single individuals, pretty much working by themselves with their students, and others which have been teams in both of the categories I mentioned. So I would, in terms of the two investigators within the same institution, I would not force fit a collaboration. You're not going to score more points because you're collaborating. It's really the idea and the qualifications of the investigator. If you think somebody else brings great strength to your team, then by all means think about collaboration. But don't collaborate just to think that we're going to check a box that's in your favor through a collaboration. That won't happen. It's the idea and the person. Then the same thing across multiple institutions. I would just say, ask yourself the question, could one of the reviewers potentially say, well, why isn't this person collaborating with so-and-so? They've got a key element of capability that goes beyond what they can do and would be hugely helpful in advancing the idea. And if there isn't any person that falls in that category, don't force a fit.
Thank you. Would you like to follow up on the other question about the microbiome engineering as well?
Yeah, this one is about microbiome engineering and where could it go? This is really in the health sciences. We get a lot of questions like this. And, it's hard to answer. Many of the engineering field applications are bioengineering. And in the biological sciences, many of those projects have applications in medicine. I think, let's say with regard to science versus medicine, probably the more basic the work is, the more it belongs in a science category. Perhaps the more applied it is, the closer it gets to the medicine category. And even in engineering, we get such a broad range of applications in engineering. One Hill Prize winner was actually a pharmacologist in engineering who was doing some terrific engineering, even though she's from a pharmacological department. So we take a pretty broad interpretation. And unfortunately, I don't think we can give you a whole lot of help on this one. You'll just, I think, have to use your best judgment. Terrence and Stephanie, do we have any process in place administratively early on to look at the application? I think we have the ability to have the subcommittee chairs talk with one another, but only after we've received the application. In other words, it's conceivable we might move it around if we feel it's in the wrong one. Would you address that, Terrence or Stephanie?
Yes, we do have a meeting set up for the subcommittee chairs after they've had a chance to review the cover pages. And if they feel like anything could be better suited in another category, they can discuss that and move it over. And if they decide it should be moved over, we will let you know as the applicant that it's been moved to a different category.
So again, we've had this question many times. I just don't think we can give you a whole lot more advice, Terrence or Stephanie, unless you have anything to add. I'd say it's up to you and use your best judgment as to which fits best.
I would agree. We had a question from Karen.
Yes. Hi, thanks so much. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, great. I wanted to ask a clarifying question about the public health category. So, Dr. Ritz, I appreciate your comments and your service on this committee and your advocacy for this prize. So the definition of public health referred to sort of total populations. And so I'm wondering about, oftentimes we're doing research on populations, but it's not, the population might be specialized to some certain group, like people with diabetes or cancer survivors or, people, communities that are, racial or ethnic minorities, that sort of thing. Are those sorts of things acceptable, or do you really want something that's going to apply to the entire population?
So am I supposed to, yes, yes, Karen, good to hear your question. I believe that that's totally acceptable and encouraged and follows directly with the clarifying comments that I made after Dr. Daniel's generic statement. David, would you agree?
Absolutely, yes. Yeah, groups of people are fine. I think it's just, beyond an individual, right?
Right.
Great, thank you very much.
Thank you for your question. David, we have another specific question about broad antiviral drug that will fit into the Hill Prize framework, if you want to talk about that at all.
Sure. Well, again, I would just say an antiviral drug could, fit into probably the biological sciences or into medicine or into population health. I think I'd need to know more about specifically what it is you're proposing to do in order to answer that. But I would say if you're really working on the biochemistry of the drug at the molecular level, to me, you're in the biological sciences arena, and probably that's where it would belong. If you're looking at impacts on populations, it could be in public health. I mentioned before, a former Hill Prize winner in engineering was actually a pharmacologist working on engineering to preserve the drug at more normal temperatures. So it just depends, but that's the way I would think about it. I guess all I can do is share the thought process I would use in trying to determine which one is best. And I see an anonymous question. Who needs to submit the proposal? Does it need to be the PI? Absolutely, yes, it needs to be submitted. That doesn't mean you can't have an administrative assistant, help you with it and so forth, but ultimately it has your name on it, you, the PI, and you are the person submitting it, and you need to have the approval of your cognizant university official or institutional official or company official, whatever it might be.
Thank you. Then we have another question in here about elaborating on how they would use Hill Prize funding to accelerate their work and make significant impact on society.
Sure. This question actually comes up in the review committees often, like, well, why should we give them $500,000? Almost everybody who wins has significant funding somewhere. So it's, this is probably not the largest award they ever had. But it really becomes a question, okay, how would this really make a difference? Maybe they've hit a stumbling block, for example, with NIH funding, and it's just too risky at this point to move forward. So I think that's how you would use the Hill Prize. I'm gonna de-risk this. I'm gonna take on the 2 or 3 key issues that are necessary if this is to really advance and move forward. In other words, that comment Stephanie made about the budget, we're not looking, to see budget sheets, but we're looking at the question, how sensible is the alignment between the money you're requesting and some reasonable expectation that you'll be able to progress through the evaluation of your idea. So that's really what we're after, is just is this a sensible use of money? Maybe you need lab work, maybe you need some other kind of work, maybe you need to build a prototype, for example, and maybe you need to subcontract out to several people. just convince the subcommittee that you're using the money wisely to accomplish what needs to be accomplished.
Thank you. We have another specific question, but they're ultimately asking how you decide who is a co-PI or key personnel, how you make that distinction between the folks that are in your team.
Yeah, this is the question from a new assistant professor and a senior person. Would your requirement to put myself as a co-PI? I think the co-PI, correct me if I'm wrong, Stephanie, has to meet all the qualifications, correct?
No, they do not.
Just the PI, not the co-PI.
Correct.
Okay, so thanks for clarifying that. So the question really is, could a junior professor be a co-PI where the senior professor is the PI? And the answer is yes, at least mechanistically. And I would say that's a good thing from the point of view that both might benefit, right? And that all seems okay, Stephanie and Terrence, unless you see a problem with it. I certainly don't see a problem. I think the only issue is, to be sure, as I said before, the senior person's not, just a figurehead. They really are taking a very active role in leading the project. Otherwise, good to go.
Thank you. We have one more about if the Hill Prize funding can be used to complement existing funding on a project. So if there's some overlap.
Terrence and Stephanie, from a mechanistic standpoint, I don't see any problem. We don't have any requirements. I would just say, for me anyway, I would not want to see it be duplicative, right? You're not going to, two sources of money to pay the same thing. But as I said earlier, every Hill Prize winner's had a significant portfolio of past work, right? And the Hill Prize logically builds on things you've already done. And sometimes you already have current projects underway. And the idea of the Hill, in fact, that's a good thing, right? The idea of the Hill Prize is it could take maybe a basic research project and really try to propel it towards societal impact. So I think, bridging off of a current project, perhaps creating a vector for impact that's beyond the scope of the other project is all good. I'm sure the review committee would have a question about that, but this would be a great opportunity in that budget sheet to explain, hey, I have some funding to do so-and-so, but that funding does not allow me to do such and such, and I want to do such and such with this Hill Prize, and here's how it would change the world if I can get the Hill Prize and do such and such. So just make your case, but otherwise good. And Stephanie and Terrence, I see you nodding affirmatively. So there's nothing in our rules, I believe, that would create a problem with that. Correct?
Correct. All right. Are there any other questions before we conclude the session? All right. I don't see any more. So thank you all for attending today's session and to Dr. Daniel for leading the session. We hope you found the information valuable. The video and slides from today will be posted on the TAMIS website and included in a follow-up email. And again, the application guide, eligibility requirements, and frequently asked questions are available on the TAMIS website. There will be a survey available at the end of the session for attendees to submit feedback. And we would also like to invite you to join us in February for our 2026 TAMIS Annual Conference. The theme of the conference is Pioneering Climate Innovations. It will take place February 2nd through 4th, 2026 in San Antonio, Texas. And like we said earlier, the 2026 Hill Prize recipients will be recognized at a prize ceremony at the opening reception on Monday, February 2nd. And this year will also be special because we'll be celebrating the 20th anniversary of the Edith and Peter O'Donnell Awards with a special ceremony on February 3rd. The event is open to all in the research community, and you can learn more on our website. Thank you so much for attending. Like we said, the prize submission form will open on May 1st. The deadline is 6:00 p.m. on May 31st. If you have any questions or need any Further information, please contact us at tamis@austin.utexas.edu. That concludes today's session. Thank you so much for joining us.
Bye-bye, everyone.